Today we have the privilege of hosting Kevin Coogan, and as Senior Director of Film and Television Music at ASCAP, and formerly as the head of his own artist management company, and as a major label executive, Kevin Coogan is an internationally known expert on the marriage of music and image. And currently he is the personal manager for one of America's leading classical composers, Eric Whitacre. And in addition, he is known as one of Loyola's most notable alumni. So please help me welcome Kevin Coogan.
Thanks, Meredith. Thank you. That's notable alumni, not notable student, I have to say. So, yeah.
No, that's great. We always are looking for that. So all of our alumni. Yeah. Well, we know, speaking of education, that an educational foundation is really important to the music industry. And how did your move from being a business marketing major, how did you end up working for ASCAP? And what was kind of your beginning position at ASCAP?
Well, I had a few jobs in between. I moved out to Los Angeles after I graduated from Loyola, excuse me, with a business marketing degree. This is well before the music business program started. And I really just went from door to door looking for a job at that point. And my first job was working as a receptionist in a PR company for this crazy lady. I lasted about 8 weeks from her, and when I left, she didn't pay me. That was a good first job in Los Angeles. And then had a few more kind of really quick part-time jobs. And then through a recommendation of a friend, I got a job at a place called Cashbox Magazine, which doesn't exist anymore, but for probably 40 or 50 years was a major trade magazine right on the same level as Billboard. And it was a great place to work at the time because it was its glory days were behind it, but what that did was allow people who worked there to do as much responsibility as they wanted. So I did radio and retail research. I wrote an article on independent labels and retail. I did concert reviews, record reviews. Basically anything to get free tickets or CDs at that point. So, but what it really did, the most important thing it did was give me a really good overview of the industry. Again, this is going back to 1987, and there really wasn't a whole lot of materials out there to teach you about the music business. There are some trade magazines, but in terms of textbooks, the only one I could find was called This Business of Music, and it was edition number 2, and it was brutal and how boring it was. So. I know there are a lot of great books out there now, fortunately, but kind of just had to find my way. But again, the magazine gave me an opportunity to get a good view of the industry and focus on where I wanted to go next, and that was working at a label, doing A&R, which I wasn't alone in wanting to do that. Did that for a couple of years. I had some success doing that. Left the label to go manage one of the bands that I had signed, and managed them for a couple of years. Did a lot of touring, recorded a couple of albums, had some success there. I'm giving you the short version. That came to an end for different reasons. One being is that artists don't get paid. So that was another lesson we learned. No matter how many records you sell, if you have 10 people in a band, good luck feeding them. So, and then from there I went to go work at ASCAP, and I worked there for 10 years in the film and TV department. And left a year and a half ago to get back into management full time. Okay.
Well, going back to your ASCAP position, you were there for 10 years.
That's
is
right.
That right? What kind of challenges did you come across about placing music, as you were the senior director for film and TV?
That's right.
Music, and what kind of challenges in placing music did you come across?
Well, I worked in the membership department at ASCAP. So ASCAP's main purpose is to license, collect, and pay the royalties out to our writer and publisher members. Working in the membership area, the job really included recruitment of new members, trying to do as much as you can to help them develop their careers, whether it's through helping them form relationships, giving them advice, maybe trying to find them a job, and that sort of thing. So that was really the main job there. And I also ran a couple of workshops as well, too, a film scoring workshop for young film composers. That we put together. That's, I think, in its 20th year now or something.
And tell me more about the workshop.
It's an 8-week workshop. basically people apply from all over the world, generally people who've gone through some sort of postgraduate composition program. And from the couple hundred people submissions we get, they should all be past tense. Sometimes I feel like I still work there. I was there for so long. We pick 15 people. They come out to Los Angeles, and it's basically 3-4 nights a week, 3-4 hours an evening. And the main focus is on the business of creating a career as a film composer. One of the cool aspects, and I guess the creative aspect of it, is that each student is supplied a 3 to 5 minute cue from a recently released feature film, and they get an opportunity to write a piece for a 40-piece orchestra and then actually conduct it on a major sound stage with really the top musicians in town.
Wow.
And they get to use that for their demo. So
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that Randy Newman was one of kind of your guest composers.
That's right.
What was that like to kind of, did you actually get to work with him and kind of see him?
He's a trip, to say the least.
Yeah.
I'm actually good friends with his manager, Kathy Kerr, and I mean, he's just a super talented guy, and he's got a foul mouth, and but he loves music, and I don't think I've met anybody who loves musicians or appreciates musicians and musicianship more than he does. He really, really likes working with the orchestras and with the players. I mean, that to him is like the thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit, I want to talk, I'm sure you do too, about Eric Whitaker and how he is your kind of, I guess your project, he is
right.
your kind of focus. And how did you go about meeting him or connecting with him?
I met him through the workshop, actually.
Yeah.
He came out, he was a Juilliard grad. He came out to Los Angeles in 2000. And, with, like a lot of composition majors, being a film and TV composer is certainly the best way financially to make a living anyway. And he also loves films, and he thought, well, I guess this is what I should do. And he and his wife moved to Los Angeles, and he spent one day at the USC film scoring program and left, because he had already at that point had done 7 years of undergrad at UNLV and then 2 years at Juilliard. And I think once he sat in another class, he was just like, I got to just start writing music. I've had enough classes at that point. And he applied to the ASCAP workshop, and he was terrific. I mean, he was like, as talented as everybody is that gets into it, he was definitely the guy that year. But it apparently convinced him not to pursue a career in film and TV music because of the nature of the business, which is basically you're working for somebody else. You're working for the vision of the director and of the producer. At any time, they can throw out whatever music they want. They don't have to necessarily give you a logical reason of any sort. And it's also a really tough grind to be a film and TV composer. It's incredibly competitive. You have to keep your studio up to date. I mean, the demos they have to create now basically have to sound like full orchestras. It's, it's a very, very difficult business. But that's not the reason why he did it. He didn't want to do it. It's really just so he can continue writing his own music. At that point, he'd already been published and was doing already pretty well for himself, selling sheet music, for ensembles and particularly for choral music.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So, and as a manager, he's mostly a classical composer.
That's
Is that
right.
correct? What kind of challenges do you come across in being a manager for a classical composer?
There are a few, but I think there's even more exciting opportunities. Actually, I'm not a musician. Excuse me. I played some brass instruments in grade school and haven't attempted it ever since. But so to be working with a classical musician, someone as talented as him, I try not to think about that aspect of it too much. I know he's good. People seem to think he's very good, and we just go with it from that angle. But Eric's unique in the sense that he makes a very good living, again, just through the sales of sheet music. Some of it is because it's incredibly popular, and some of it is because of some smart business decisions he made as far as keeping the publishing and self-publishing. He also spent, during his undergrad years and continuing forward, so probably for about 10 plus years, he was out all the time lecturing and conducting and doing master classes at pretty much anybody who would have him, from high schools in the middle of nowhere to major universities to all over Europe and Southeast Asia and South America. And through doing that, he just built up this incredible fan base. And over the years, a lot of his students are now teachers and directors, and they're now in charge of buying the music. And as it turns out, it was a pretty good way to build a career and a reputation. And you know, that's his retirement. You know, it's pretty nice, and it's allowed him to have some more flexibility now in what he does and what he accepts in terms of jobs. He doesn't have to accept any commissions anymore, which is a great place to be in. Though he does have a couple of big ones right now on his plate. He has a commission for the London Symphony Orchestra and Chorus next year, which is very exciting. And then in 2009, the Long Center in Austin, the new Performing Rights Center there, he's going to be writing a 60 to 70-minute oratorio for full orchestra and chorus and soloists and multimedia presentation and whatever other crazy stuff we can think about. So, but Eric, going back, he was in high school. He was in a techno-pop band, you know. He wanted to be Duran Duran or Depeche Mode or something like that. So he was always fascinated by computers and synthesizers. It's really where he started, and just played by ear until he went to school and taught himself how to read. So.
That's incredible.
So to your question about the classical thing, we kind of approach it like a pop career. We don't really look at it as like the confines of a classical career. And we're doing pretty well. He's written a musical now, which we had a production with this summer, which combines a lot of different pop and classical elements to it. And you know, knock on wood, we'll be on Broadway or the West End in another year or two. But yeah, and his wife, Gila, who I also represent, she's a classical singer, and she has more of a traditional career, I guess, in the sense that she does a lot of premieres and recital work. And pretty much the way that goes is we get a phone call, they want Gila to perform, is she available? They send her the material, and she goes out and she sings, you know, which seems to be more the way it goes. Eric, you know, does all sorts of things. So I think we're trying to find the best of the business of the pop world and then the best of the classical world, and take advantage of it both. Is that me?
Don't know.
And then we also try to take the worst of both of them and just throw them out, you know. So.
Well, it kind of sounds like Eric, Mr. Whitaker, has made your life a little easier by making all those connections very early on.
That's right.
So kind of what is the scope of your responsibilities as a manager, as a personal manager?
Pretty much anything, you know. I mean, I consider the job of a manager, at least myself, is really to try to create as many opportunities for your artists as possible, and then doing anything that needs to be done to facilitate the process to getting it done. You know, sometimes that's being on the phone or email all day long. Sometimes it's calling in favors or calling friends, old relationships to get some advice on certain things. You know, it goes from, sometimes it's, you know, picking Eric up because his wife has the baby and needs the car. I mean, who knows, right? It could be everything, and it's pretty much 24 hours a day. Not that I work 24 hours a day, but I'm on call, you know. And it's dealing with all the other relationships, from attorneys to agents, to venues, to publishers, record labels.
Yeah. Do you find it, and I know that you, your only two clients are Eric Whitaker and his wife.
That's correct.
Is that easier, or is that actually, could that be more of a challenge in some ways?
Well, fortunately, they do pretty well. So, and I get paid strictly on the commission basis. So financially, it works out fine for me. One thing that when I did management years ago, working for this rock band, again, it was just myself at that point, but there were also 9 or 10 of them, depending on the day, and that was exhausting. I mean, that was something else. I was dealing with a whole bunch of set of other issues and problems, you know, many times dealing with the police or whoever it was. So it wasn't, you know, now I'm with my respectable classical musicians, but yeah, working with the two of them is great. I mean, I don't think I'd ever want to get to the point where the business is so big that I would have so many artists that, you know, the more artists you have, the more staff you need, and then basically all of a sudden, I feel like I'd find myself managing a company and a bunch of employees rather than working with the artists. Right. I like having that close relationship with them, and to me, to me, business can be very creative, and that's really what I get off on. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned the kind of the pop world and treating Eric Whitacre as a kind of a pop artist in that direction and really promoting him that way. But there are some differences. I mean, promoting a classical artist and versus promoting kind of more of a popular artist. What are those major differences? I mean, in similarities.
Well, nowadays it's getting pretty blurred, I think. You know, I was talking to some people earlier about, you know, one of the good things about classical music that kind of spun my head around when I found it out coming from a different world was, you know, when Eric gets approached to do a commission, you know, they approach him to do a commission. They agree on the length of the piece and generally the style of the piece. They agree on a fee. They pay him the fee. It's due at a certain point in time. He goes out, conducts the premiere of the piece. It gets published, and then he keeps 100% of the publishing. So they're giving him money, and he's keeping the publishing. That's completely different the way it works in the pop world, you know. It's basically, if you're going to get any money, you're giving something up, and usually it's publishing is first and foremost. So, so there's certain business practices that are different like that. So that would be one thing that we would say that we would try to take advantage of is on a positive side. I guess it's more of a marketing, promotional thing or imaging with Eric. With all the years he's spent traveling around and meeting people during classes and lectures and concerts, we just call that going on the road, basically, doing a club tour. Instead, we're going to universities and, you know, community choirs or whatever it may be. But it's the same thing. It's getting out there and making that face-to-face, you know, connection with people.
Right.
And he's totally sincere and a nice guy. And, you know, it's just been a groundswell. I mean, I don't know how many classical composers have 26,000 friends on MySpace or, you know, without doing any crazy external, you know, extra outreach or whatever. But yeah, so I think it's probably just more of that. And the way we're going to start recording our own tracks as well too, and start distributing those. I think it's probably more in the pop model. Though you'll see it in the classical music, it's happening more and more. I think with a lot of the orchestras now have deals where they're going to start recording their own recordings. They had to renegotiate with the unions, and they'll start distributing them digitally, and that's already happening now. So. Great.
Yeah. Well, what about you did mention touring, and I know that you've been on a few tours. Is that correct?
That's right.
With bands and whatnot. Where I'm sure there is a difference between where the popular band goes and how do you go about promoting a classical musician on a tour? I guess is kind of what I want to know because it's going to be a lot different, a very different venue. So could you explain a little bit about that?
Well, we haven't quite gotten into that yet because with the choir, which is primarily what Eric's known for, he again makes a good living with his symphonic and band music, but the choir music seems to be where he has the most fanatics. Like anything else, it means getting people on the road and moving bodies. So at this point, the touring, quote-unquote touring that we've done has more been, we have this little model that we've kind of created where they're festivals, where he'll go in and he'll work with some local high schools, and then he'll do a master class with the university, and then we'll do a concert with all the above with him conducting and sell tickets to that. He'll get paid for the master classes, he'll get paid for the concerts, and we kind of get in and out of there in 72 hours and, you know, hopefully make some money doing that. So, but the idea of going and actually moving the same ensemble from venue to venue is something that he'd like to do at some point in time. It's just going to take time to really sit down, you know, find those groups of people and figure out what makes sense financially to compensate everyone properly and to move them around. My thinking is it makes more sense to do it regionally type of thing, you know, to find particular choirs in certain parts of the country. You can kind of do the hub and, you know, spoke, you know, type of thing and just have them do 6 dates or something like that in a particular region and pick the best professional choir in that area, you know.
Yeah. Well, in promoting a little bit more on the marketing side, in promoting any musician or composer, kind of how do you go about promoting kind of a solo career, I guess, is about my question.
As it relates to, say, Eric or Gila?
Yeah.
I think it's easier as long as that individual is talented and has a good work ethic, you know. It's tougher too because all the focus then is on the individual.
Right.
You know, it's you know, it's like take a band like Coldplay, you know, would you look at them any different if it was called the Chris Martin Band, you know? Maybe. I don't know, you know. Puts a lot of pressure on that guy, you know.
Yeah.
He doesn't have his friends to lean on. So, yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, especially today with everything kind of in the music industry and in kind of a chaotic mode, and there's a lot of independent artists really getting publicity, and how do you make your artist stand out as opposed to the next one?
Okay. Well, it's a good question. And again, we talked about this earlier, is the fact that now that there's so many more opportunities for exposure for individual artists, that also just means that it's open up to everybody, right? Everybody has those same tools available to them. You know, short of getting arrested or doing something like that, then I guess it would really have to focus on the work.
On the promotion. And
Yeah. And try to do it in slow steps, keeping in mind that, you know, anything that gets out there is basically out there forever. So, you know, while you don't want to handcuff yourself and you still want to be sort of spontaneous, I think, in the way you promote yourself. You just I think you kind of need to take your time and figure out how you want to build it, you know, without losing control of it. So,
Right.
yeah.
And that kind of goes back in, and I know that Eric Whitaker also has a MySpace, which you mentioned, and the visual aspect. And with all of his experience in writing for film, I guess more on that area, you have been known to strongly encourage the marriage of music and film, especially with your position at ASCAP. With MTV's kind of lack of music, I guess, music videos, do you foresee a shift in the music industry, in the visual? I guess the music videos are kind of becoming a dying novelty. Kind of what are your take?
Well, I mean, then you have YouTube. I mean, you could say that's actually just starting, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to create your own video, I think people are pretty forgiving nowadays for production values. You know, it doesn't have to look like a, you know, P. Diddy on a yacht type of thing anymore. I think people, in fact, are probably more offended by that than they are impressed, if anything else. But I think the video or visual medium is incredibly important for promoting artists. You know, and now with, you know, cell phones in the next 2 years, I think you're going to see an explosion of that as well too.
Yeah.
And the fact that you know, it's way overused, but people saying that TV is the new radio. You know, that phrase, that there's some truth to that, but looking at that, the power of television to sell music now, if people can get it in little snack-sized bites, you know, little video treats with the music, I don't see why not, you know. I don't see MTV making a comeback personally.
No,
But,
probably not, unfortunately. Well, kind of shifting gears, you mentioned about the publishing and how that, especially for Mr. Whitaker, is huge with sheet music, which
That's
is,
right.
you know, I would have never thought of.
You and me both. I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess can you tell us a little bit about your experience with kind of the publishing side of the music industry and what you've learned and, you know, learned to do and what not to do, especially as managing and.
Well, sheet music, I mean, side is fascinating to me because I knew nothing about it. As far as really the economics of it and just the pure numbers. People make a lot of money through sheet music, as it turns out. Many of them are still alive, in fact, and most of them you've never heard of, you know. So people who basically create music for high schools and college ensembles, and they know what they're looking for, and, you know, they write these pieces that I guess, you know, allows certain directors to go through the checklist and say, this is a piece that'll help our ensemble, you know, do what they need to do, and hopefully it sounds beautiful as well too, right? And it's a huge, huge business. Like I said with Eric, he started early on just kind of as a fluke, wrote this piece, it got heard at a festival, someone asked him to publish it. They asked for a few more pieces of his, and then he wrote a band piece and nobody wanted it, and he self-published that. And that's when the light went off in his head that, you know, instead of making 8 cents on the dollar, he could make 80 cents on the dollar if he did it himself. And that's what he continued to do for the most part, and that's why he's done very well for himself on that end. So it's an incredible business, and we look at it though too. I mean, talking about from the pop side of things, I look at a piece of sheet music and it's like, okay, there's the cover, and it's blank inside, and you've got the music, and it's blank on the back. It's like, shouldn't there be like a commercial or something on there? It's a bunch of billboard space on there we could be selling, for something. But we'll get there maybe eventually. I don't know, but it's just an interesting, fascinating business, and the fact that it's people can make as many Xeroxes as they want, but it's relative to CDs, it's pretty steady income in the sense that people are going to replace this from year to year whenever it wears out, and that every couple of years there's a whole new set of students that come in that they need to buy music for. So if you have some pieces that are part of the standard rep, you can do very well for yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the sheet music side of things. And then in publishing, it's with the business in general just changing very quickly, and I think ultimately for the better. We've I think found ourselves in the last 5 or 10 years in this gray area where things are getting worse for the major labels, and there hasn't been any upside to the independent artist.
Right.
So they've been caught in the middle of this bloodbath. But now the tools, or more and more tools, exist now, and it just seems like nowadays it seems like every 3 to 6 months you see some new cool application that's a great way to promote yourself or to sell music or whatever it is. That artists are becoming more and more empowered. So when it comes to publishing, it's just that much more important to hang on to your publishing. Right. It really is. Some publishers can do certain things for you. It's not necessarily going to be in the contract, so you kind of have to rely on certain things. If you can get in the contract, that's the best thing. There's also more creative publishing deals out there that are more what you would call standard administration deals, where they're really just going out and collecting money from you. And eventually, hopefully, there'll be a reversion clause where it'll come back to you after X number of years, and you can renegotiate at a certain point in time. And then what's really popular now, they're kind of admin deals, admin plus deals, where they're basically administration deals. But if they go out and get some sync work for you, if they were to actually get something placed in film or TV or a video game or something, then their percentage gets bumped up, and they get a piece of the upfront fee and that sort of thing. So I think you start seeing that becoming more and more standard, actually. But yeah, there's no, I don't know. If you're going to take an advance for a publishing deal, I would say only do so if you have absolutely no confidence in your career. I mean, you're basically just, giving it away. It's really tough. It's a tough pill to swallow a couple years down the line. Yeah. Once you really realize what you've done. That's not to say that there can't be good situations with that, but my first advice would be, don't do it. Do it take it as far as you can by yourself, and then at least put yourself in a better negotiating position. Right. But once you give it away, you can never give it back. Yeah.
Do you find yourself ever you mentioned contracts and reading over any kind of contracts, and where you come into that with any kind of management that you've done as far as like publishing deals, or and I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
So how do you pick that out, and how do you negotiate something like that?
Well, you have to be in a position to negotiate. The first band I worked with, we frankly were in no position to negotiate. But fortunately, because we knew people who worked at the publishing company, we got a decent deal. I mean, it was a co-publishing deal, so which was at that time in the early 90s fairly typical. You basically gave up half the publishing, and the idea, so the artist basically retained 75% of the pie, right, and 100% pie. And publishers still back then, you could kind of rely on them to actually get some usages for the music. This particular publisher was Chrysalis Music, who's still an independent publisher. And they did a fair job as far as getting the music out there and getting some placements for us. But, if you were to do the math and look at the advance that we got versus the money that they made, I mean, there's no comparison. They made out like bandits, yeah. Which is why they're in the business they're in, Right. So, yeah. So being a publisher is not such a bad idea, I guess.
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is.
Everyone's been told.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned about you knew someone at the publishing at the publisher, and it seems, especially in any industry, but also in the music industry, it's really who you know. I mean, it's sad, but it's really kind of true. And I wanted to ask you kind of about NARIS, and I know that you've served on the board of NARIS for quite some time. And can you tell me a little bit about that, about your experience with the Recording Academy?
Yeah. I was, this was, I think, 2000 to 2004. I was on the LA chapter board. And the way that came about was friends I'd known for a long time that were involved with NARIS. Someone recommended that I run for the board. And I did, and to my surprise, I got elected to the board. You know, not fooling myself. I know a lot of that had to do with the fact that I worked at ASCAP, and you know, I had a pretty good little, you know, group of people that would vote for me, looking at the ballot. So, but I was there for 4 years, and it was a great experience. I mean, the people I got to meet was incredible. You know, I mean, I could be there in one night and be sitting between, you know, Charlie Hayden and Jimmy Jam, you know, and Bob Ezrin, and you know, all these big wigs, you know. And, so it was pretty cool, and pretty much when you got in the room, everybody was pretty equal, you know, in terms of their input and that type of thing. So it was a great experience for me. It's you know, the music industry, and in the film industry, because there's a lot of film people involved in that as well too, film music people. There's all kinds of charity events that happen all year long, you know. Pretty flashy charity events. I'm not sure how much money they make on them. I'm just kidding. They're very, very good events. But to be in a room with these people and see the ones who are actually like chair people and put it together, that was exciting, you know. You know, and basically I would say that I could call any of those people even today, a couple years later, and you know, if there's a favor or something I needed answered, that they would help out. So.
Do you feel with NARIS and kind of the Recording Academy that as being a member of the music industry, as a person in the music industry, do you think it's really necessary or beneficial to be a part of NARIS? Since it seems
I don't know if I'd say
possible.
it's necessary, but I mean, I've been a member for almost 20 years. I joined when I was at the magazine still, and I mainly joined because, you know, NARIS is one of the places you would get your RIAA gold certification information that I needed to put together the chart that I was doing, you know. That's when I first joined, and you know, and I'm kind of a newsletter freak, you know. If there's a newsletter, I'll sign up for it. So so with NARIS, I was a member for years and never did anything with NARIS. And then, you know, I was fortunate enough to go to a couple of the Grammy Awards, and which is a blast. And then once I got involved in the Governor, that's really when I have to say is when I kind of became a full-fledged member. Up to that point, I would just go to events, you know, as an employee of ASCAP, and you know, for whatever tribute it might then from time to time. So, but you know, NARIS is an interesting organization. I think there are parts of NARIS that are really good. I mean, I think the Music Cares thing and the Grammy in the Schools and all those do good work and have a lot of potential, but I wouldn't say it's necessary to be a member, you know, if you're looking to work in the industry. It seems like it'd be a great place to work at, you know, that's for sure. After working at the record labels and then going to work at ASCAP, one of the great things about ASCAP, it's a not-for-profit organization, membership run, and it really, the focus is 100% on the members. It's the exact opposite at the major labels, you know, as far as the focus and you know, what people go in day to day to do, you know. So after working at ASCAP, I got, well, it was also a combination of working at the labels and really not liking it, and then working at ASCAP and really enjoying that, to see the advantage of the kind of the nonprofit formula working within the industry. And my guess is, you know, the Recording Academy might have some similar vibe to it to go work there. So
yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that ASCAP is not for profit, and I did know that, but that reminded me, because you have BMI as well, and you know, and that is the broadcaster's kind of side. But what what other differences besides, I mean, between ASCAP and BMI? And can
Well, like you
explain
said,
that?
ASCAP, ASCAP was formed by a group of, songwriters and publishers. The board is made up of 12 writers and 12 publishers voted on by the membership. It does have an executive, staff, a president who basically runs the day-to-day operations. I'm not sure you'd want songwriters running the day-to-day operations of a billion-dollar corporation. I don't know, maybe not. And BMI was formed about 20 years later, once ASCAP went to try to go license commercial radio. BMI formed Broadcast Music Incorporated kind of as their own organization because of that. And I believe their idea was that they would break the back of ASCAP and the PRO would no longer exist. But, here we are several decades later, and, they're both still around battling it out. I think competition's good. I think the fact that there's two of them, it makes them both work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Philosophically, I agree with ASCAP, the way their business is run. BMI's board is made up of broadcasters, the same people that you negotiate with to pay licensing fees. It seems to be a bit of a contradiction there. Not saying there is, but, it just seems, I'm still programmed as an ex-ASCAP employee,
Oh, yeah.
that there's something fishy over there. So, but I do think that it's good that there's competition, certainly. I mean, as a writer and as a publisher, you should definitely check them both out and use the fact that there's somewhere else you can go to your advantage.
Yeah, so do you feel that then kind of as an artist, musician, composer, that you should belong to both, or?
Well, you can't belong to both as a
Right.
writer. You can as a publisher. You can have a publishing
Publisher.
company at both, but as a writer, you can only belong to one.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would definitely go on the ASCAP side on that one.
If I was a writer, if I was
I'm
talented
sure
enough to
you
be a
would.
writer, yeah. I mean, one thing some people do is if they're a songwriting team, is one joins one and one joins the other, and then they compare statements, and then,
Oh, okay.
yeah, then
I
beat up
see.
the organization that's paying them less, so.
Yeah. Well, what advice, I guess, would you have for especially all of us and going into the music industry and really kind of learning about it now that we have a great program to kind of work from? But once we get into the industry, what would be the biggest lesson that you've learned, especially from working with such an industry giant as ASCAP?
Well, I mean, one thing is to take advantage of your time here is really just continue just to learn as much as you can about the business. I mean, there's so much information out there now that, everyone's on an equal playing field. The only thing that really just separates you from people who've been in the business a long time is the fact they've been doing it a long time. They have these relationships that they've developed, and that, they've kind of already made their mistakes, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
Looking back for myself, I just kind of just kept finding my way around, and, when one opportunity closed, just trying to see what the next door opened that looked appealing to me. If I had any regrets, it was probably not following up on certain relationships, that someone said, oh, you should meet so-and-so, and it's like, yeah, maybe I will, or maybe I not. And then like 3 years later, it's like, oh, great. Guy's, second in command at A&M Records, or whatever, something like that comes up where you're like, every relationship can be important, and that's, that'd be one thing I think, is just to continue to nurture relationships. And no matter what area of the business you go into, you still need to know everybody else's business. I think that's really important. Certainly as a manager, it's essential that you at least know a little bit about every aspect of the business, at least to know what questions to ask, and to hopefully have a group of relationships or resources where you can go get the answer if you don't already know it. But even not being a manager, no matter where you work in the business, I think it's really important to know what everybody else does, just to see how everything works together. One thing I've been doing since I moved out to Los Angeles is, I read the trades every week, without fail. I mean, I read Billboard every week. I read Variety every week. I read the New York and LA Times every week, the business and art section. Sometimes it doesn't add up to anything. Other times there are just, gold nuggets in there that just, you can use whatever down the line. But I also think if doing it over a long period of time, it really helps you just kind of figure out how everything interacts, that is really kind of this organism that keeps changing. And yeah, I think it not only helps you maybe find your path, but it certainly helps make smarter decisions. So,
Yeah.
and that's something you'd start as soon as possible, is just keep reading,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, I would like to kind of open it up to questions.
Sure.
We can take a couple questions. Anybody?
As an A&R in a major label, what was the pressure you felt from different executives and whatnot as far as the musical content that you were, supposed to go out and get and whatnot?
Well, I first worked at MCA as an A&R assistant, so I didn't have the opportunity to bring bands in, though I did try, but nobody really listened at that point. And then when I went to go work at Zoo Entertainment, I technically at first got hired as in the artist development department, which was more of a product manager in the label. And but I knew bands, and I went out at almost every night, and there were a couple bands that I just brought to the label and kind of by default became an A&R person as well too. Bands were Green Jello. I don't know if anybody remembers Green Jello, Green Jelly, Three Little Pigs. Remember that crazy thing? Who is the band I left to go manage for a couple of years. And if anybody knows anything about the band, you can imagine spending 3 years in a bus with that. That was pretty crazy. And then actually a band that was an offshoot of Green Jello, Tool, was the other band I worked with as well too. The president, the label made the ultimate decisions to sign the bands. He had the final say, not even the head of A&R. Head of A&R's job at that label was really just having a relationship with producers and managers who were bringing them new acts and that type of thing. So, those were the only two bands I brought to the label, and they both got signed. So I didn't have really too much resistance, and then I didn't stick around too much longer after that as well, the frustrating thing working at the label at that time was they signed just about anything. I mean, this was a brand new label, and I'd say in their first year they released 30 albums. There's no way they could put that much attention at all of those records, and it showed. The only albums I said that I think really took off was Matthew Sweet had a record out of the label, Tool, Green Jello, and those were all kind of reactionary records. They all kind of broke out for different reasons, whether it was a video or through good press or whatever. Nothing by any master plan by the label, But A&R now I think is completely different. I don't think people are really out there searching for bands. It seems like people are doing research more than actually going to clubs. They're trying to find bands that already have some kind of regional following and that type of thing, which from their position is actually probably the right way to go. I think the independent labels are really the ones picking up the slack as far as really finding artists and hopefully nurturing them over a couple of recordings, Yeah.
What advice would you give a student who wants to become an A&R?
An A&R person?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to do A&R, right? I'd say start your own record label, really. To go to a label and become an A&R person, you could do it for the experience. If you could get a job working for an established A&R person just to kind of watch how they do things, that'd be great. Working in a recording studio, of course, would be helpful. I'd say to work on your skills as an A&R person rather than to just put on your A&R name tag, and say you're an A&R person. But you're probably better off, and it certainly would happen much more quickly if you just started your own label and you made all the decisions, and all of a sudden you're an A&R guy. To go work for a major label in A&R right now is very, very difficult. In fact, I don't know anybody who's happy who's doing it right now. There's not a whole lot of risk being taken, to say the least. Most of that's being done through farm teams, I guess you could say, like other independent labels. So I'd say if you want to be an A&R person, just say you're an A&R person and start making records. Publishers still do some A&R, more so than the labels.
What would you say are the pros and cons of both ASCAP versus BMI? I mean, I know that you're probably going to be skewed to say that ASCAP is better, but and then also, do you see CSAC as a viable alternative, and what are the pros and cons of that, if you know anything about that?
I mean, I'll tell you what I know and what I've heard. And with ASCAP, they have a follow the dollar system where basically wherever they collect money from, be it country radio, broadcast television, satellite. Those monies are paid out in those areas through the research in those particular areas. BMI has more flexibility in their system. The numbers aren't out there, but my understanding is it's anywhere from 10 to 20% of the revenues that they collect kind of fall into this gray area that they can move around a little bit if they want. So, you know, if you're a benefactor of that moving around of the money, that's fantastic, you know, if you're a BMI person, so you can benefit very well. CSAC, I don't know much about other than the fact that they're privately owned, and it seems like that they're, you know, seems like their end game is to get bought at some point in time. They're really, their main thing now is trying to get market share, you know, and trying to increase their licensing fees, and through doing that, they're basically, you know, giving big advances to high-profile songwriters and composers, which will, you know, kind of force the hand of the broadcasters to then take licenses. But the word on the street from them from day one is that they're just looking for some exit strategy. I don't know that for a fact, you know, to say the least, but yeah, I would say like anything else, you want to shop around and check it out and see who you feel most comfortable with. CSAC, I think, still has less than 8% of the overall business. It was 2% though, only like, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. So, and they've done that through a lot of television acquisition, television composers that they've gone after. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but yeah.
With so many artists really getting their start with this internet and the digital revolution, how has that affected your clients, being that they're in the classical world? Because most of the artists that you see that are coming through here are on the popular side or the jazz side. How has that influenced your clients?
It's been great. I mean, it's been great for my clients. You know, I can't speak for other classical artists, but both Eric and Gila are, you know, they're super talented. They're good looking. That doesn't hurt, you know. Let's be honest, you know. So that doesn't hurt putting your face up there. It's enabled him for, again, with all the work that he does on the road, to really continue those relationships, you know, through MySpace and Facebook. It's not like we'll go to some town and then that relationship's over, you know. It's enabled him to really to kind of grow that fanatical fan base, which has been great. We're working on some recordings now, so the hope is that come after the first of the year, we'll be able to tap into that and, you know, just digitally distribute them ourselves. And I mean, we feel fairly confident that we can chart on iTunes classical chart with just, you know, without any help from a major. You know, we truly believe that. So, you know, money's always an issue, right? So as far as production costs and those types of things, those are things we have to always find our way around, creative ways to do that. If you're a huge orchestra, that's a big issue with recordings, you know, with the major classical labels now. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. A lot of them seem to be going to this model where the musicians record for less for a bigger back end, you know, for sales, and that they actually own the masters. So I think you'll see more of that. But for us, it's been incredible. You know, I think anytime you can go out and make a contact with someone, whether it's through a performance or, again, with Eric, through a master class or a lecture, whatever it may be, and then to be able to continue that relationship is fantastic. So I think we're just starting to scratch that now, too, a little bit.
What's your favorite part about your job right now? That's my first question. And also, if you had the chance out of any job in the music industry, is there anything that you've been kind of like, wow, I really wish I could do that? And you like, do you see yourself kind of moving on in the future, or do you really like where you are right now?
I'll answer it's like Bill Clinton. I'll answer the second question first. Yeah, as far as where I see the business going, I'm not sure there is a job that I am looking forward to doing in the business beyond this one. Certainly not for a major label or anything like that. And as far as the job now, I mean, it's great because it enables me to really just use everything I've learned over the years and try to apply it. And, you know, with Eric, you know, the vision we have or the plans that we have for his career, you know, go 10 years down the road from now. And it's just really exciting to be able to be in that process. As I said earlier, I mean, I think business can be incredibly creative. And that's, yeah, I feel like I'm in the sweet spot right now for that, actually. So I wish I could afford an assistant, but other than that, you know, it's pretty good right now, yeah.
It seems your role as a manager for such successful artists gives you a unique ability to shape a lot of culture. I was going to see if you have any ideas on what responsibilities you might have to your audiences and to the culture you're dealing with in promoting your artist.
That's a good question. I mean, fortunately, again, Eric, he's, you know, though he kind of, again, started in high school as, you know, wanting to be Simon Le Bon or somebody like that, you know, wanted to be the techno pop star. He truly, you know, I think now all he really wants to do is just create music that's beautiful and has some depth to it, you know. He doesn't like to call it classical music or anything else, and without getting too corny or, you know, serious about it. I mean, that's how he truly feels, is that he just, you know, feels compelled to make music, and he just hopes that people, you know, that he can actually make a connection with people through that. So it makes it pretty easy from that point of view that he's coming from such a, you know, solid footing, you know, in relation to your question. You know, there's definitely responsibility there, particularly since he still does a lot of teaching and lecturing for younger students, and they really look up to him, and he's just terrific with them. He's very gracious, and I think just continues to encourage people to really just follow their muse. You know, he hates music theory. I don't know if that means anything, but that's one of his. That's one of his soapboxes when it comes to when kids ask him about, you know, who are getting ready to go to a graduate program or something like that. He's just like, don't let them destroy your soul, you know. Yeah, I'm very fortunate that the people I work with are just really, I mean, as great as artists as they are, they're even better people, I believe. You know, so. And that's the idea. And one other point, too, you made me think of this for some reason. I don't know why, but we were doing a speech. I guess Eric was doing one of his things at Texas Tech last year. And we were talking to the students, and someone had a question about his business, because Eric is really involved in the business, and he's, you know, gets very excited about, you know, having control over, you know, what he creates. And somebody had a question where basically, you know, not so... He basically was saying, you know, calling Eric kind of money grubbing, you know, type of a thing, and, you know, why are you so focused on the business? And, you know, I had to remind this guy that really one of the main reasons to have control over your career business-wise is that so you can be in control of the creative process as well, too. It's probably the most important thing. You know, working for a record label on their schedule, you know, can be soul-crushing for artists, because you're always waiting on them to do something, and you're also on their schedule, right, whatever it is. Now's the time you record. Now's the time you go on the road. Now's the time you sit at home for 6 months and wait. Being in control of your career, of your publishing, of your recordings, et cetera, you know, really allows him to, you know, be in control of his artistic input when it arises. So. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out as it relates to it, but that's really what it's all about, is just trying to maximize that. And my only concern with Eric is him doing, you know, too many things, too many interests. This musical is just a monster, and it just sucks all the air out of the room, you know, whenever we get around it, and we've been in the middle of it now for a couple years. And he stopped taking commissions. We've got a few more now that's due for him next spring, and then the following spring as well. But I saw a biography on Leonard Bernstein, and you know, with looking at his career, and throughout the 50s and then the early 60s, he had West Side Story, and then he became main conductor for the New York Phil, and he just became so addicted to the thrill and the rush of conducting, he stopped writing, and could never really get that back when he wanted to again, you know. So that's one of my concerns with Eric, is just having him, go down these paths where he may be incredibly passionate about, but not to get away from, you know, what maybe his true gift is, which is composing, you know. So anyway, that was your last question. I got a few more points in there, so.
All right, well, thank you so much
Is that
for
it?
coming. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
thank
We
you.
are finished.
Appreciate it. Thanks.